In the heart of Newbridge, a small yet vibrant city known for its charm and diversity, retired Army Major Clara Hayes stepped out on an unusually chilly evening. She had spent hours preparing herself, carefully choosing her outfit, pinning her silver-streaked hair neatly into a bun, and polishing the medal she wore close to her heart. It wasn't just any day. It was the anniversary of her late husband's birthday, a man who had stood by her side through decades of service and sacrifice. Tonight she wanted to honor him in a way that felt right, by celebrating his memory at one of the most renowned restaurants in town. The restaurant, called the Golden Fork, was tucked away in a corner of Main Street, its windows glowing warmly, under soft lights. Clara pushed open the heavy glass door, the faint sound of clinking glasses and murmured conversations welcoming her inside. For a moment she paused, taking in the elegant ambiance, the polished wood floors, the crisp white tablecloths, and the gentle hum of classical music playing in the background. It felt like the perfect place to pay tribute to the love of her life. Clara approached the host stand where a young woman with a clipboard glanced up briefly before returning to her screen. "Good evening," Clara said softly, her voice steady but warm. "I have a reservation under Hayes." The hostess flicked through her list, nodded curtly, and gestured toward the dining area. "Someone will be right with you," she muttered without looking up. Clara smiled politely and stepped aside, waiting patiently as instructed. Minutes ticked by, and though other patrons were seated almost immediately, no one came to escort her further. Finally, a tall man in a tailored suit appeared. His name tag read, "Gregory, Manager." He scanned Clara from head to toe, his expression unreadable. Then, without so much as a greeting, he leaned in slightly and spoke in a low tone. "Ma'am, I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. This isn't really the kind of establishment suited for your attire." Clara blinked, momentarily stunned. Her dark blazer, modest skirt, and polished shoes seemed perfectly appropriate for the occasion. She touched the lapel of her jacket, self-consciously, unsure if she'd somehow misjudged the dress code. Before she could respond, Gregory continued, his words sharp and dismissive. "We aim to maintain a certain standard here. Perhaps another restaurant would better suit your needs." A wave of heat rushed to Clara's cheeks, but she forced herself to remain composed. Decades of military training had taught her how to mask emotion in the face of adversity, but this was different. This wasn't combat or strategy. It was personal. Every ounce of strength within her screamed against the injustice of being judged based on appearances rather than character. Still, she simply nodded, turned on her heel, and walked out of the restaurant, her head held high despite the sting of humiliation. Outside, the cool night air hit her face, offering little comfort. As she stood beneath the flickering street lamp, staring at the glowing sign of the Golden Fork, something shifted inside her. Anger bubbled beneath the surface, not reckless rage, but a quiet determination. Clara Hayes wasn't someone who let disrespect go unanswered. And while revenge might not be her first instinct, she knew one thing for certain. What happened tonight wouldn't end here. Little did anyone know, Clara was about to turn this painful encounter into something far greater than anyone could imagine. But first, she needed time to think and plan. The next morning, Clara sat at her kitchen table, the sunlight streaming through the window and casting golden patterns across the wooden surface. She sipped her coffee slowly, her mind replaying the events of the previous night over and over again. The manager's dismissive tone, the condescending glance, and the way he had spoken down to her. It all felt like a slap in the face. But Clara wasn't one to dwell on bitterness for long. Instead, she channeled her emotions into focus, her thoughts sharp and deliberate. As a veteran, Clara had faced countless challenges throughout her life, both in the military and as a civilian. She'd learned early on that anger, when unchecked, could consume you. But when harnessed properly, it could fuel change. And right now, she felt that familiar spark igniting within her. What happened at the Golden Fork wasn't just about her. It was about every person who had ever been judged unfairly because of their appearance, race, or background. This wasn't going to end with silence. Clara pulled out a notepad and began jotting down ideas. At first, they were scattered, A letter to the restaurant owner, a social media post exposing the incident, even organizing a protest outside the establishment. But none of these options felt quite right. They were too predictable, too easy. If she truly wanted to make an impact, she needed something more creative, something unexpected, something that would force people to think twice before treating others with such disdain. Her gaze drifted to the medal pinned neatly on her bulletin board, the same one she had worn to the restaurant last night. It was a Purple Heart, awarded to her after being injured during active duty. That medal represented sacrifice, resilience, and honor. Suddenly, inspiration struck. What if she used her story, not just as a victim of discrimination, but as a proud veteran, to shine a light on the deeper issue? People respected stories of courage and perseverance. Maybe this was her chance to turn humiliation into empowerment. Over the next few days, Clara threw herself into research. She visited local libraries, combed through online forums, and reached out to fellow veterans for advice. One name kept coming up repeatedly: Marcus Lane, a former Marine turned community activist known for his work advocating for equality and justice. Though hesitant to reach out at first, Clara eventually sent him a message explaining her situation and asking for guidance. To her surprise, Marcus responded almost immediately, inviting her to meet him at a nearby cafe. When Clara arrived, Marcus greeted her warmly, his broad smile instantly putting her at ease. Over steaming cups of coffee, she recounted the events at the Golden Fork, leaving nothing out. Marcus listened intently, nodding occasionally but never interrupting. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair, stroking his beard thoughtfully. "You've got fire, Clara," he said finally. "And you're right, this isn't just about you. This is bigger than one bad experience. But if you want to send a message, you need to do it strategically. People won't listen unless you make them care." Marcus went on to explain how powerful storytelling combined with action could create real change. He suggested starting small, sharing her story publicly while simultaneously working behind the scenes to address systemic issues like bias in customer service. Together, they brainstormed ways to highlight the importance of respect and inclusion, not just in restaurants but everywhere. By the time their meeting ended, Clara felt a renewed sense of purpose. For the first time since the incident, she didn't feel defeated. In fact, she felt invigorated. The seeds of a plan were beginning to take root, and she knew exactly where to start. But there was still one question lingering in her mind. How far was she willing to go to ensure that no one else endured what she had? Whatever the answer, one thing was certain: Clara Hayes wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. The days following Clara's meeting with Marcus were a whirlwind of activity. Armed with his advice and her own determination, she began laying the groundwork for what would become more than just revenge. It was going to be a movement. But first, she needed to share her story in a way that resonated deeply with others. Her goal wasn't to shame the Golden Fork or its manager outright. Instead, she wanted to expose the larger issue of prejudice and discrimination hidden beneath polite smiles and polished surfaces. Clara decided to start small but meaningful. She opened a social media account dedicated solely to sharing stories of resilience and dignity. She named it Respect Beyond Appearances and posted her own experience as the inaugural entry. In the post, she described the events at the Golden Fork without naming names, focusing instead on how it felt to be judged unfairly despite her service and sacrifice. She ended the post with a simple yet powerful question. How many times have you been treated differently because of how you look? And what can we do to change that? To her surprise, the response was overwhelming. Within hours, comments poured in from people all over the country, some sharing their own experiences of being mistreated in public spaces, others expressing outrage on her behalf. Veterans, in particular, rallied around her, flooding the page with messages of support. One comment stood out: "And thank you for speaking up. We've all faced moments like this, but not everyone has the courage to turn pain into purpose." Reading those words brought tears to Clara's eyes, not of sadness, but of hope. She realized she wasn't alone in this fight. Encouraged by the outpouring of support, Clara took the next step. She reached out to local journalists, pitching her story not as an act of vengeance, but as a call for awareness. A young reporter named Emily Chen agreed to meet her at a quiet park bench near Clara's home. Over cups of tea, Clara recounted the incident at the Golden Fork, emphasizing the broader implications of such behavior. Emily listened intently, scribbling notes and occasionally nodding. When the interview ended, Emily promised to write an article that captured both the gravity of the situation and Clara's inspiring response. Meanwhile, Clara continued working behind the scenes. With Marcus's help, she drafted a petition calling for mandatory training programs on diversity and inclusion for all businesses in Newbridge. The petition gained traction quickly, thanks, in part, to the growing visibility of her social media campaign. Local community leaders began reaching out, offering their support and pledging to push for legislative changes. Even some employees from the Golden Fork contacted her privately, apologizing for the manager's actions and revealing similar instances of bias they'd witnessed within the restaurant. But Clara knew that simply raising awareness wasn't enough. If she truly wanted to make a difference, she had to confront the source of the problem head-on. That meant returning to the Golden Fork, not as a victim seeking justice, but as someone determined to spark meaningful dialogue. She didn't tell anyone about her plan, not even Marcus. This was something she needed to do alone. On a crisp Saturday morning, Clara walked back into the Golden Fork, her heart pounding but her resolve unshaken. The hostess recognized her immediately and hesitated, clearly unsure of what to do. Clara smiled gently, easing the tension. "I'm here to see Gregory," she said calmly. "It's important." Word spread quickly among the staff, and soon Gregory himself appeared, his face pale and his demeanor nervous. For a moment he seemed unsure whether to apologize or defend himself. But before he could say anything, Clara extended her hand, her expression firm yet kind. "There's no need for excuses," she said. "What happened here wasn't okay, but I believe in second chances, for individuals and institutions alike. Let's talk about how we can move forward together." Gregory blinked, visibly taken aback. He hadn't expected compassion, and neither had anyone else watching silently from the sidelines. Little did they know, Clara's visit was only the beginning of a much larger transformation, one that would challenge them all to rethink their assumptions and redefine respect. As she left the restaurant later that day, Clara couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was ready. After all, turning pain into purpose was what she did best. Clara's unexpected visit to the Golden Fork sent shockwaves through the restaurant and beyond. Gregory, the manager who had humiliated her just weeks earlier, found himself in an unfamiliar position, listening rather than dismissing. As Clara sat across from him in a quiet corner of the dining room, she shared not only her personal story but also statistics and anecdotes about discrimination in public spaces. Her calm demeanor and unwavering focus disarmed him, forcing him to confront the reality of his actions. "I didn't realize," Gregory stammered at one point, his voice tinged with guilt. "I thought I was maintaining standards." "It's not about standards," Clara interrupted gently but firmly. "It's about respect. Every person who walks through those doors deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of how they look or what they wear. That's the foundation of good leadership." Gregory nodded slowly, visibly shaken. For years, he had prided himself on running a successful establishment, believing that strict rules ensured excellence. But now, faced with Clara's perspective, he began to see the cracks in his approach. He promised to make changes, starting with mandatory diversity training for all employees and revising the restaurant's policies to prioritize inclusivity over superficial judgments. Word of their meeting spread quickly among the staff. Some were skeptical, whispering that Gregory was simply trying to save face after being called out publicly. Others, however, felt inspired by Clara's grace and determination. One server named Mia approached Clara as she prepared to leave. "Thank you," Mia said softly, tears welling up in her eyes. "You're standing up for people like me, people who've been judged without even getting a chance." Clara smiled warmly, placing a reassuring hand on Mia's shoulder. This isn't about me. It's about all of us working together to create a better world. Don't underestimate your own power to make a difference. As news of Clara's efforts continued to gain traction, so did the ripple effect. Emily Chen's article was published in the local newspaper, painting Clara not as a victim seeking revenge, but as a catalyst for positive change. The piece highlighted both the incident at the Golden Fork and Clara's subsequent campaign for inclusivity, sparking conversations across Newbridge. Community forums were organized, where residents discussed ways to address systemic biases in businesses, schools, and other public spaces. Even more surprisingly, Clara received an invitation from the mayor of Newbridge to speak at an upcoming town hall meeting. At first, she hesitated, unsure if she was ready to step into such a high-profile role. But Marcus encouraged her, reminding her that her voice carried weight because of her authenticity and experience. People listen to you because you're genuine, he told her. Use that to inspire others. On the day of the town hall, Clara stood nervously behind the podium, scanning the crowded room. Faces of all ages and backgrounds stared back at her, some curious, others supportive. Taking a deep breath, she began to speak, sharing her journey from humiliation to empowerment. She spoke passionately about the importance of treating everyone with respect, regardless of appearances, and challenged the audience to reflect on their own biases. When we judge someone based on how they look or what they wear, we miss the opportunity to see who they truly are, she said, her voice steady and strong. We miss the chance to learn from their stories, to grow alongside them. Let's choose kindness over assumption, empathy over judgment. Her words resonated deeply, earning a standing ovation. Afterward, dozens of attendees approached her, thanking her for her courage and pledging to support her cause. Among them was a young entrepreneur named Daniel, who owned several small businesses in the area. He offered to partner with Clara to implement diversity training programs in his establishments, setting an example for other business owners. By the time Clara returned home that evening, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. What had started as a single act of humiliation had grown into something far greater, a movement fueled by compassion and understanding. And yet, Clara knew this was only the beginning. There was still much work to be done, both in Newbridge and beyond. But as she looked out her window at the twinkling lights of the city, she couldn't help but smile. Change was possible. All it took was one person willing to stand up and speak out for what was right. In the weeks following the town hall meeting, Clara's campaign gained momentum in ways she hadn't anticipated. The movement she had started, Respect Beyond Appearances, was no longer just a hashtag or a local initiative. It was becoming a beacon of hope for communities far beyond Newbridge. Local businesses began reaching out to her, eager to learn how they could implement similar changes within their own organizations. Schools invited her to speak to students about empathy and inclusion, while community centers hosted workshops inspired by her message. Despite the growing recognition, Clara remained grounded. She knew that true progress required more than speeches and social media posts. It demanded action. To ensure lasting change, she partnered with Marcus and other activists to create a comprehensive training program aimed at addressing unconscious bias in workplaces. The curriculum included interactive exercises, real-life case studies, and open discussions designed to challenge participants' assumptions and encourage self-reflection. One of the first businesses to adopt the program was Daniel's chain of coffee shops, which were popular gathering spots across the city. Daniel worked closely with Clara to tailor the training specifically for his employees, emphasizing the importance of treating every customer with respect, regardless of their appearance or demeanor. He even went a step further by introducing a kindness card system, where customers could nominate staff members who demonstrated exceptional compassion during service. Winners received small rewards, but more importantly, their stories were shared on social media, inspiring others to follow suit. The impact was immediate and profound. Employees reported feeling more empowered to speak up when they witnessed unfair treatment, while customers noticed a noticeable shift in the overall atmosphere of the shops. One elderly woman wrote a heartfelt letter to Daniel, thanking him for creating a space where she felt seen and valued, a stark contrast to her previous experiences elsewhere. One evening, as Clara sat at her kitchen table reviewing notes for an upcoming presentation, she paused to reflect on how far she'd come since that fateful night at the Golden Fork. What had started as a moment of humiliation had evolved into something extraordinary, a movement rooted in compassion and fueled by collective action. But even as she celebrated the victories, she reminded herself that the fight for equality was far from over. Little did she know, her next challenge would come not from detractors or skeptics, but from someone much closer to home. And it would force her to confront a side of herself she hadn't fully acknowledged until now. As Clara continued to pour her energy into the movement, she began to notice subtle changes in her personal life, changes that made her pause and reflect. Her daughter Jasmine, who had always been supportive of her mother's endeavors, seemed distant lately. At first, Clara chalked it up to Jasmine's busy schedule as a college student juggling classes, part-time work, and social commitments. But one evening, when Jasmine finally sat down with her, the conversation took an unexpected turn. "Mom," Jasmine began hesitantly, "do you ever feel like maybe this is too much? Like you're trying to fix everything for everyone but forgetting about yourself?" Clara blinked, caught off guard by the question. She set aside the stack of papers she'd been reviewing and turned to face her daughter fully. "What do you mean?" she asked gently, though a flicker of unease stirred within her. Jasmine sighed, fidgeting with the hem of her sweater. I see how hard you're working, Mom. You're out late almost every night answering emails all weekend and constantly talking about what needs to be done next. It's inspiring, don't get me wrong. But sometimes I worry you're putting so much pressure on yourself that you might burn out." Clara opened her mouth to respond but hesitated. Over the past few months, she had indeed poured every ounce of her energy into the movement, often neglecting rest or moments of quiet reflection. She told herself it was necessary, that the cause was bigger than her own needs. But hearing Jasmine articulate these concerns forced her to confront a truth she'd been avoiding. She wasn't invincible. "I didn't realize you felt this way," Clara admitted softly. "I thought I was showing you what it means to stand up for what's right." "You are," Jasmine replied quickly, reaching out to take her mother's hand. "But standing up doesn't mean sacrificing everything else. You've taught me so much about resilience and empathy, but maybe now it's time to practice those lessons on yourself." The words lingered in the air, heavy yet honest. That night, as Clara lay awake in bed, she replayed the conversation over and over in her mind. Was she pushing herself too hard? Had her determination blinded her to the importance of balance? For years, she had prided herself on being strong, not just for herself but for others. Yet here was her own daughter reminding her that strength also meant knowing when to step back. Determined to address Jasmine's concerns, Clara decided to take a rare day off. She spent the morning tending to her garden, something she used to love but hadn't done in months. As she knelt among the flowers, feeling the soil beneath her fingers, she allowed herself to breathe deeply for the first time in weeks. Later, she called Marcus to share her thoughts. "I think I've been running on autopilot," she confessed. "I'm grateful for everything we've accomplished, but Jasmine's right. I can't keep going at this pace without losing sight of why I started in the first place." Marcus listened quietly before responding. "Burnout is real, Clara, and it's okay to slow down. Movements like yours aren't built overnight. They grow because people care enough to sustain them. That includes taking care of yourself." Encouraged by his words, Clara resolved to make small but meaningful changes. She delegated some responsibilities to trusted allies within the movement, allowing others to take the lead on certain projects. She also carved out dedicated time each week to spend with Jasmine, rediscovering the joy of simply being present with her family. Yet even as she embraced this new rhythm, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to learn. Just when she thought she understood the full scope of her journey, another layer revealed itself, one that challenged not only her actions but her mindset. It came during a meeting with a group of local business owners eager to implement diversity training programs. One woman, visibly hesitant, raised her hand and asked, "But what if we mess up? What if, despite our best intentions, we still say or do the wrong thing?" The question struck a chord deep within Clara. She realized that while she had spent months teaching others how to treat people with respect, she hadn't fully addressed the fear of imperfection, the very thing that often held people back from trying at all. And so, as she prepared for her next big presentation, Clara knew exactly what message she needed to convey. Growth isn't about perfection, it's about progress. By embracing vulnerability and learning from mistakes, true change becomes possible. Little did she know, this lesson would soon resonate far beyond the walls of any conference room. Clara's final presentation took place in a packed auditorium, the culmination of months of hard work and introspection. Business owners, community leaders, students, and activists filled the rows, their eyes fixed on her as she stepped onto the stage. The air buzzed with anticipation, but Clara felt an unusual calm, a sense that this moment wasn't just about delivering another speech. It was about leaving behind something lasting. She began by recounting her journey, from the night at the Golden Fork to the movement that had grown far beyond what she ever imagined. Her voice was steady, yet there was a vulnerability in her, words that resonated deeply with the audience. "I started this because I wanted justice," she said, pausing to let the weight of her statement settle. "But along the way, I learned something even more important. Change isn't about perfection. It's about progress." She went on to address the question posed by the hesitant business owner during their earlier meeting. "We all make mistakes," Clara continued. "And yes, sometimes our efforts will fall short, but that doesn't mean we stop trying. It means we listen, learn, and grow. Every step forward matters, even if it's small." The room erupted into applause, but Clara wasn't finished. She turned to a screen behind her, where images of people from across Newbridge appeared, young and old, diverse in every way imaginable. Each photo came with a caption sharing how they had been impacted by the movement. There was Mia, the server who now led diversity workshops at her workplace, Daniel, whose coffee shops had become models of inclusivity, and countless others whose lives had been touched by Clara's courage. As the slideshow ended, Clara stepped away from the podium and walked to the edge of the stage, closer to the audience. "This isn't my story anymore," she said earnestly. "It's ours. Together, we've shown that kindness can break down walls, that empathy can bridge divides. But the real test lies ahead. Will we continue to challenge ourselves? Will we hold each other accountable when we stumble? Because true change happens not when one person stands up, but when everyone does." Her closing words hung in the air, followed by a standing ovation that seemed to go on forever. People approached her afterward, some crying, others shaking her hand or hugging her tightly. Among them was Gregory, the manager from the Golden Fork, who thanked her once again for giving him a second chance. "You changed me," he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "And you've changed this city." In the weeks that followed, Clara scaled back her involvement in the day-to-day operations of the movement, trusting its continuation to the growing network of advocates she had inspired. Instead, she focused on rebuilding her own life, spending time with Jasmine, tending to her garden, and rediscovering the quiet joys she had neglected in her quest for justice. Yet, even as she stepped back, Clara knew her legacy would endure. Schools began incorporating her training programs into their curriculums. Businesses proudly displayed certificates of completion after implementing inclusive policies. And in neighborhoods across Newbridge, conversations about respect and understanding became commonplace. One evening, as Clara sat on her porch watching the sunset, Jasmine joined her holding 2 cups of tea. "You did it, Mom," she said softly, handing 1 cup to Clara. "You really made a difference." Clara smiled, gazing out at the horizon. "No, sweetheart," she replied. "We did. This was never just about me. It was always about us. About creating a world where no one has to feel invisible or unworthy." Jasmine nodded, leaning against her mother's shoulder. In that moment, Clara realized that the greatest victory wasn't in the accolades or the widespread impact. It was in knowing she had planted seeds of hope and resilience that would continue to grow long after she was gone. As darkness fell over Newbridge, Clara felt a profound peace. She had faced humiliation, anger, and doubt. But through it all, she had chosen compassion over bitterness, action over despair, and in doing so, she had proven that even the smallest acts of courage could spark monumental change. The story of Clara Hayes wasn't just one of revenge or redemption, it was a testament to the power of humanity. And though her journey had reached its peak, the ripple effects of her actions would carry on, inspiring generations to come.